Hello one and all, and welcome back to ADSR. We're here again. My name's Paul Nolan. If you don't know me before now, welcome to ADSR Sounds. This is the channel for you if you want all things music production, education, production tips, and also over on our website, adsrsounds.com, for all of your needs for plugins, courses, sound, presets, samples, everything. So, we did an amazing stream a couple of nights ago. Definitely check that out. Well worth having a look at. And been a great week for plugins. And we're going to get the weekend off to the best possible start by looking at Baby Audio's brand new plugin, which is called Transit. And it is another very, very special plugins. We seem to be living in a good time for plugins at the moment. Lots of really, really good ones coming out at the moment. And again, one of them recently was Baby Audio's first ever synth, which was called the BA1, which is also worth checking out. So this thing is fantastic, absolutely beautiful in terms of the elegance of the purpose of it. So we are going to waste no time in getting straight into it here because it is well worth jumping in for. Before we do that though, please do me a favor. If you are new to the channel, please give us a subscribe, hit the like button, share it with your friends, your other audio geek, nerd, music production friends. We're all a happy tribe of audio geeks here. So please do that. And, you know, hey, helps us out. Means we can do more live streams, helps us out with the algorithm. You know, all that, you know, YouTuber-y down with the kids stuff. All very, very cool. So we are going to move over into a share. And there we go. Now we're straight in Ableton. Now, what I used to do, or what I usually do in a lot of my streams, is that I would normally work with like a loop or an idea that I'm working on because I'm using, say for example, like, you know, the Acid plugin we looked at the other day. I'm normally, you know, in production with something. With Transit, it's slightly different. You can use it that way, but I thought it'd be quite interesting to actually utilize it in a track that I've pretty much written. So again, the whole thing with Transit is that it is about transitions, right? It is about being able to, you know, make these lovely little upshifters, downlifters, impacts, sweeps, all of that stuff, and to do it in a really, really innovative way. And it fits a really beautiful kind of context that we will talk about. But without, you know, talking about too much further, I'm going to play this track. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play like sort of halfway through the breakdown or the intro here, and we'll get an idea of what type of track it is and what kind of transitions we're going to need. And I have got Transit absolutely slathered all over this thing, and we're going to use it in a number of different contexts to take a track that is already towards the end of its production process and enhance it massively in various different ways. So here we go. So we've got this lovely ethereal vocal for starters, and then it will kick in here at around our bar 17. So we get this lovely, you know, again, arpeggio noise kind of situation. So I'll just let it play for a second just so you get an idea. Play it up to about, you know, bar 49 here, something like that. So you can hear those lovely leads coming in, and then later on, you know, we've actually got some sounds that we can really work with. So there's this transitional sound here, which I'll just play on channel 15, and you know, we can play around with this and a number of other sounds. So actually this wasn't made with Transit, but we can do interesting things with it. And you'll hear lots of other weird processing going on. So anyway, let's get into it. First of all, what we can do is actually, in fact, we'll start off here and we'll play it from here. So you'll get it for 8 bars and you'll hear some of the other elements that we can work with. So you get the idea. So first things first, we could actually start with this lovely little kind of stuttery kind of pad. Get that going first. There you go. Okay. So let us pop our first instance of Transit open and let's make it nice and big on the screen so we can kind of get into it. So the whole thing with Transit is that it gives you this amazing control over real-time effects and even some oscillation, and it can produce its own sound to an extent in the service of creating sweeps and everything else. So we'll look at that. So as I said, I've probably got about 8 or 10 different instances of Transit, all kind of showcase different things, which would be really cool. So yeah, this preset here, I've put it on this kind of like stuttery pad. And again, as I turn this transition control from 0 to 100, what you'll see, there's several kind of macro movements going on. So it's similar to, say, for example, when you've got, an instrument rack in Ableton, shall we say, where you can assign various controls to a single knob and then turn one knob and then about 15 things happen at once. This is very much Baby Audio's kind of interpretation of that, but it's incredibly powerful. And again, it's a collaboration with obviously a very well-known music production guy on YouTube called Andrew Huang. And as I say, it's kind of like a coming together of Baby Audio and Andrew, and it works brilliantly. So I'll let the plugin do the talking because, again, actually straight away, one of the things that we've got here at ADSR is when you buy Transit through ADSR, you get a bonus pack of presets, and this is one of them called Lovely Particles. So you'll get an idea as I turn this, as you hear the pad kind of regenerate, shall we say, as I hit play. Here we go. So you get this lovely shimmering kind of sound. And of course you can decide at any time to run it back. So it's quite a nice element. So you've got pitch shifting going on here. So this is kind of heading up by about a fifth, so 7 semitones with some delay and some reverb, a gain control and some tonality in the form of a very basic filter, I'd imagine, and then some auto panning. And of course, you've got another 2 slots here to be able to add in other effects. So it's a really, really powerful thing covered up in a quite simple kind of front end. So we're going to really get into this. So we're going to use some of the presets from the ADSR pack. We're also going to build some of our own. You may have noticed, actually, or you may not have because it's covered up by my camera, but next to this I've got a second version, a second instance of Transit, which will be completely blank, which we'll start playing around with, and we'll do some pretty cool things with it. So again, this is all completely automatable, and again, automating this transition control will allow for this movement to work itself in and out based on, say, for example, you assigning it to a MIDI control, a rotary control. Maybe you've got something like an Ableton push like I have here. I can assign it straight away to there. But one of the other things you can do is obviously click on this transition control, and you can actually make these automated. So they will trigger on the bar. So if I was to click here on this little play icon, you can see it flash yellow. And what's going to happen is over the 4 bars, we're going to get that movement, and it's going to loop because we've got it in a loop mode here. So let's hit play and see what happens. And you hear the sound roll on. So quite cool. The other way that you can trigger is via hitting the pendulum control. Now, what the pendulum will do is kind of another way of saying that it will play forwards and then swing backwards. So it'll play in reverse. So again, without the loop on, it will play all the way through and then stop. It will, pendulum forwards and backwards and then stop. So you can use both of these together in order to help things move backwards and forwards in a perpetual way. So again, you can use this in an incredibly macro way, like I'm doing here, to completely change a sound. Another thing you can do is use it incredibly lightly in order to gain something like a bit more of a subtle movement. So what I can do is I can actually cut the mix down here. So we're going to use this in a number of different ways. I've got this on send and return channels. I've got this on my master, believe it or not, for master effects. And one of the reasons why I chose this like kind of breakbeat record is, one, because I think it's pretty good and one of the better things I've written in recent times, to be completely honest with you. But also the fact that, in a lot of these sort of breakbeaty styles, these kind of like transitional effects are quite common being put over the master. So it can be really, really interesting. So you can hear here with the mix at 22%. And even if I put the transition control here like so, it's obviously not completely overtaken the sound, but it's added that little bit of depth to it. Which means if I go to my tremolo plugin here, and if I add in and then add in the mix, great for breakdowns. And then back we go. So yeah, just a little bit about the sound. You can see I'm using a Zebra plugin here. Big, washy, giant, trancy pad. Interesting thing, the actual preset itself was used in the Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack. But the tremolo is a tremolator. And again, that's giving it that kind of gated, stuttery kind of feel. Brilliant kind of palette to work with stuff like Transit, as you can hear. So let's have a little bit of a look at how we can make our own versions of this as we go along. So we'll still use the same sound and the same pad. And as you can see, you've got a couple of different skins here. I've got a dark one and a light one. So it can be really useful to differentiate if you're going to use more than one instance, and actually some amazing results can come when you stack presets. You take something a bit more subtle, you push it through something a bit more extreme, you get the idea. So what we can do is obviously stack it, and it runs the signal flow, if you will, runs top to bottom, left to right. So you'll get that as we go through. So you can see here, if you hit the little plus icon, you've got all your various different units. We're going to start with a delay. And then we're going to be able to actually program what's going on here. So as you can see, if I move the traction control, my God, I've been playing too much Gran Turismo recently. I'm talking about traction control rather than transition control. So if we move this transition control a bit more rather than the transmission control, motorsports jokes are going to go about the wayside right now. What we can see is that actually nothing's happening. And the reason why is that you have to assign the control to move. So if we do that by clicking the little yellow dot here, little yellow light, it assigns it to motion. And what you'll be able to see if you look very carefully is that there's a small kind of like triangle and a more of a line. So again, it's going to show the way of direction, the method of travel, shall we say, the direction of travel. So maybe what I want to do is start it incredibly tight, a very small delay, and maybe at around this BPM, something like a 130 odd, something like that, will be like an in sync sort of like 16th note. So again, understanding delays can be quite a useful thing. So if I have that now, what you'll see is the little black dot is moving, right? And you can see that's what the transition control is going to help us move through. So we can start and we can put the feedback on, and we can do something very similar where I'm actually going to go all the way from 40 all the way to 100, which is going to be quite an interesting sound. I can do the same for the mix as well. So I'll go from 40 to 100, and then basically we'll get something like this. So quite interesting, right? Now, what could be really interesting is if we could reverse the travel here. And of course, I'm working in milliseconds on the delay, but however, we can also put a sync in if that's really what you want to do. I like sometimes getting really off the sync, off the grid, and you get some really interesting movements. And all right, not everything's in time, but that's kind of the point of the exercise, right? And as Johnny has just said, the old Echoplex trick, absolutely. And I replicate this trick on a number of different other plugins like H-Delay, like Echo in Ableton, that kind of thing. But the Baby Audio version is quite interesting because I seem to have more control over the movement. I would have to automate like an absolute plethora of different parameters in context of the other kind of like, you know, other plugins that I've mentioned. With this, it's just the one with the transition control, so it's absolutely bang on the money. So what you can do is you can actually reverse, so you can actually see when the actual control turns pink, it actually is in reverse in this color scheme anyway. So again, if we have that to about 133, something like that, so 129. Let's get it nice and accurate, something like that. There you go. What we'll get is a kind of a reverse situation. And there you go. So what could be really interesting is taking the next slot, and then let's say, for example, we might want to add something like, so you can see you've got pitch shifting, you've got reverbs, you've even got things like pump, which is like a side chain, which is quite cool. So you can add in a reverb and we can do exactly the same thing. So let's say, for example, we add the motion in, we can push it all the way to 100. We can say, for example, take the length, do the same thing. Really cool. We can possibly increase the size, let's say, for example, to about 75, something like that, and you'll get that movement again. So let's see exactly what's going to happen. We'll move this back because I kind of prefer the original version of what we came up with there. So we get this ability to really kind of define like how big this one sound gets. And of course, I'm doing this over one sound in solo. So you would obviously want to hear it in some form of, you know, context. So here we go. Really, really cool. So again, you can experiment. You could add in other elements like an auto pan, which would be quite cool. You can put different, you know, shapes of movement into it, and then obviously change the rate. You can have it as a sync on. This is on, I think, 4 beats or 4 bars at the moment, and then we'll get a bit of movement as we go through. So let's just put that back into a solo. And you can hear that passing from left to right. It's quite cool. Let's say, for example, we want to kind of go a bit crazy, and we might want to add a bit of distortion. So, yeah, we can try different distortions here. So let's say, for example, I'm pretty happy with that. So what I can do is actually click on this element here and say, right, actually, I want this to come after the auto pan. So I can actually quite easily shift things around in their slots and the settings will move with. So quite useful. So, quite nice. We'll probably hit save on that. I'll put that in my, PN folder. And we'll just call that, Echoplex Destroy PN. There you go, done. So now we've got a preset. Very, very nice indeed. Now, let's say, for example, we want to maybe go back to scratch. We can do that. You can literally hit the little eraser icon here. It'll ask you to confirm it. Boom. Back to exactly where we were previously. And also as well, what's really nice here is that you can actually completely randomize. So I've got no idea what this thing is about to do. So let's find out, shall we? Has a bit of noise. Useful if you want to add a bit of noise to something, not too bad. But then you can just keep hitting random until something interesting comes through. And as you can see, it's got like an OTT in it as well. Like really, really cool kind of multi-band compression. So let's see with a bit of bit crush. Just interested to see what it comes up with. That's quite cool, actually. So again, the random element, really, really useful. So again, very simple to build your own presets and not just rely on the ones that come with it. I believe the full version of the plugin without the extras that you get when you buy through ADSR, I believe there's about 300 presets already and you get a whole bunch more through us, as we mentioned before. So quite useful. So we've kind of looked at that particular sound. And there's lots of different ways of actually applying the sound. So you may have heard before, there's a lovely kind of like respace, and I actually spotted a really nice in another instance. This is the other great thing, by the way. I've got about 10 different, iterations of this plugin, and it's incredibly light on the CPU. That's one of the great things about it, I've noticed as well, working with it. So let's say, for example, we've got this one here called Resampling. And it adds that lovely distortion and kind of top endiness. So I might want to add a little bit of that. Mix is on about 33%. So if we push it, so we can get a nice balance between the sounds there. Let's play that with the drums. So there you go. So yeah, very, very cool. So Raccoon's asking about what the dots are in the middle of each module. So the dots are, you can actually switch a unit on and off. You've obviously got the ability to click and drag to move the various modules, shall we say. This here is, let me say, because I don't want to ruin this preset too much. Let's say, for example, I put a chorus on there. If I click here, it gives a randomization because you've got the dice up there at the top. So you can actually randomize on each individual module as well, which is quite cool in each individual slot. And then the little burger menu here as well is actually each individual effect in each individual slot have their own presets, I should say. You can tell it's the weekend. I'm starting to fall over my words. So yeah, pretty cool. So you've got that, and obviously you can clear it back from there. So again, you can use this not just as a transitional plugin, even though it is very, very useful for that. You can use it as a sound processor. So again, there's a lot going on here. There's stereo spread, there's distortion, there's some filtering, there's some extra noise being added, some multiband compression through the OTT, and flanging. That's all going to add to that, you know, Resy kind of classic again. And if you think about the actual processing going on here, if you're actually familiar with drum and bass production at all, these are things you would actually do separately to a respace to get them to have the movement and everything else. So it's all very neat and tidy, all well packaged, like very, very cool. So very, very nice indeed. So pretty nice. So Raccoon's asking, no, I meant in the center of the module. You mean these three dots here? So basically they allow you to assign an individual control to the motion control. Okay, so there you go. Very, very nice. And again, if I open up the filter a little bit, yeah, and we've got that really nice kind of vibe there. I'm just going to bring that up a few dB. And of course it's going to react when I pull the cut off. Quite nice at full mix actually. Kind of takes over a little bit and kind of removes a little bit of the movement of the actual synth, but works brilliantly. Works really, really nicely. And you can kind of hear it droning on in the background, which is quite cool as well. It will do its thing. So again, using it as a sound processor for things like bass, absolutely relevant as well. So very, very cool. Speaking of drums, yeah, this is where you can do some like really interesting stuff. And actually, like, I'm using the same preset as I've just used on the Reese on the drums. And you can do some, and this is what I mean about like with breakbeaty type stuff. Like these transitions are very, very cool. So if we just have this playing, you know, at the end of a phrase, and you get these really interesting patterns. So taking that into consideration, you know, you can do all sorts of different stuff. And again, you've got these different, you know, transitions and stuff as well. And again, you've got really interesting things where you can add some drum presets to it here. And if I just pop that up to the top, you can hear it's kind of giving that filtration and just adding a bit more, as it says, crunchy top end. So again, that's more something you can put on a bus. I used to hear stuff like that quite a lot in like New School Breaks records, you know, talking about people like Crafty Cuts, Plump DJs, Evil 9, Adam Freeland, that kind of thing, where there would be that kind of like chop and change. I mean, classic progressive breaks record like Fibonacci Sequence by BT, like there were these kind of interesting little cuts and transitions all the time. Really, really, really nice. So basically, you've got that dirty filter. And again, it's kind of got this weird, interesting tremolo and pump going on. So you can do some interesting things with that as well. And of course, there's distortion as well. So again, putting distortion on the drums themselves can be quite a useful thing. And again, I'm being a bit over the top with it so you can actually hear it. And a lot of it, like, it's reacting to the kick drum, like, understandably so. So one of the things we can do is possibly have a little look at, like, some of the breaks that I'm using, some of the actual samples. So we could say, for example, there you go. This one here on number 10. So we'll just grab another version of that. Drop it in, why not? There's enough of them to go around. And we could do something like... Too bad. There are some really nice ones in the drum destroy. Here we go. How much more lively these drums get. You instantly miss it as soon as you put it on, you know? You might want to put that behind the compressor here, just to get it to pump a bit more. Of course, you don't have to be quite so heavy-handed, but that's really livened up an already pretty lively drum sound. Brilliant. So I'll be honest, even just playing around with it in preparation for this stream has taken a track that I thought was pretty much done, and it's taken it to an entirely new level. So this is the power of it. It really, really is quite a powerful plugin. So again, there's lots and lots of different applications to it, which I think is really, really interesting. So yeah, there's plenty of different things we can do here. And one of the other things we can do, actually, is that you may have noticed here, you may not have noticed because, you know, maybe you're not the same type of sad person that I am that instantly looks at people's return tracks as soon as they see them making music. I've actually got another part of Transit on a send and return. So the send and return basically means that every track in Ableton is now available, you know, to this sound. So what we'll do is we'll put a little loop on here between 33 and 49, and we can play around with this to an extent with, say, for example, a vocal. So what we've got on Transit here on Return Channel F is this one called Descend into Soup, which kind of gives things this kind of washed out kind of effect. So pretty cool, actually. So again, this is great. Like the more reverb, delay, kind of like, you know, again, kind of fade out, big kind of like, you know, time-based effects really, you know, work well on sends and returns. So we can play around with that and you'll hear that now. So if we, again, have our vocal, and you hear that lovely ring out, which if you get this really cool, like longer kind of element that rings out for a long time. So perfect for things like, you know, filters and longer transitions, shall we say. Pretty nice indeed. And again, you can see here with the transition control, we've got actually the filter rolling down. So one of the things I might do is actually take it off motion and I can have it be, here we go. And then it'll ring out for quite a long time. So perfect for running into the transitions before breaks and stuff as well. Really, really nice. So again, use Transit on things like send and return channels. That works really nicely as well. And one of the things I've got going on actually, which, you actually probably don't even know, you haven't even realised because you haven't heard the original sound, is, again, yet another instance of transit here. And actually having something like a vocal kind of preset on here, which adds like an extra octave. So again, if we listen to that isolated, and then I turn this up, you'll hear this wicked pitch shifted kind of version of the vocal, but I can just blend that in like so, and it kind of just works in the background. This with this off is quite literally the original sound, just with a bit of echo. And we get that extra little kind of glistening kind of octave, which is quite cool with that. So what we could actually do is look towards doing some automation around that. So again, we have this ability to, you know, automate things in. So very, very quickly, we could very easily just drop in, and we could, over the part of, like, say, 4 bars or 8 bars here, we could just blend that in and have that as part of the transition. And again, we can go to send F, which is for transit, on our send and return, and we can really kind of shape that in the final analysis. So what we can do is just have a bit of a listen to this without the loop on. And if I turn F, that transition. And there it is. So what you've just heard there is exactly why I've chosen to do this live stream tonight with this new plugin on a track that's already arranged, because now I can start adding the final details. So a little arrangement tip for you all. I like to block out what I like to call block out, or put a skeleton arrangement together. In fact, completely cards on the table, I arrange this completely in the session view. And then I use the Ableton Push to live jam in. So again, the track at the moment is quite long. It is around sort of 9 minutes. I'm planning on cutting it back. But let's say, for example, that this is the final version of the track. I don't put any transitions in or do any automation or anything of that regard until the actual track is structurally arranged. This helps in a number of different ways. It means that the track will be good, and it really should be good enough, with just the structural arrangements, things arriving, things leaving, transitions between different sections, how it runs into the breakdown. It puts a real emphasis on that. Later on, you can add the details, and this is what we're doing now, and this is why Transit is such a game-changing plugin, because I can take tracks. I mean, this track I wrote pretty much a year ago, and I'm bringing it back to life with Transit. And again, think about what you would do in this situation otherwise. You'd be flicking through endless sample packs looking for the perfect white noise, the perfect down lifter, the perfect upshifter, and hope and pray that it fits the track. Or you would spend endless hours putting effects chains together and resampling and everything else. And that is something I love to do. I love that part of the craft. But Transit here has kind of added a new level to the game, where it just allows you to do a lot of that sound design work incredibly quickly. So it is very, very nice indeed. And that transition works really, really nicely. So again, we're starting to put things into context a little bit here as well. So we're using it as an insert. We've used it in, again, transitioning from one step to another. And we can definitely play around a little bit more. So what I've got here is something that, again, I kind of captured, was this really interesting kind of transitional sound. So we can play around with this still further and see exactly what it does. So if we just... There we go. So we'll want to play around with that. We'll throw yet another transit onto the patch, shall we say. And we'll obviously make this nice and large. Yeah. Yeah, and as Kevin's just said here in the chat, correct, not all samples works. As I make a hard style song, it's hard to see something that fits. And it's the same in any genre, honest to God. Like, it's so true that, you know, you are literally looking for a needle in a haystack, and that's why people kind of get frustrated and feel like they're blocked when they're not actually. It's just that way of trying to produce is actually not very much fun. It's like an admin task, and it just stilts the whole process, whereas this is fun. This is like, again, and the great thing I love about this, I actually kind of call what we're doing here contextual sound design, which means you are taking the elements that you've already used to build the track to make extra elements. This is actually that sound is one of them, actually. It was something that Pigments did, just like Arturia Pigments, just did it randomly when I used to hit stop. So I managed to record it, capture it through like one of these audio recording devices. I think it was Audio Hijack I used for the Mac. And it's really handy to have that running in the background because it just captures everything. And then I can go back. And so, again, it was the sound itself making this in a random way. Managed to grab it, capture it, sample it, put it in. And now I'm going to do even more sound design in context of the record, which is why I call it contextual sound design. So essentially what I think Baby Audio and Andrew Huang have come up with is what I would call a contextual sound design tool. Really, really beautiful. So there you go. So from here, we can do all kinds of interesting stuff. So let's have a look at some of the other elements we've got here. So we can try some of this. So let's play around. Okay, so we've got another world here. And again, that kind of more glitchy stuff's coming from another plugin. However, that added a really nice amount of like kind of glitch and reverb and delay. So that's quite cool. Anything into pad, that's going to be useful. Oh, very nice. So what we can do with that, at various junctions, we can just automate that through. So it's doing nothing. And again, that is like the whole thing on 100%. So what we could do is actually just take this. Really cool. Really, really nice. So yeah, we can kind of use that now because again, we've got this in. So, alright. So yeah, really cool. So we can still use I believe, the automation because it's still there. Yeah, effect amount. There you go. So let's just see what it does on various. Oh, interesting. Kind of like pitch shifting downwards. Really cool. Nice little kind of like movement there with some distortion. Sweet. Nice tremolo on some of them. Now that one I do like. So you might want to actually kind of keep that on the transition for longer. So let's just extend that out a bit. So what we could do is just add that for a while until it's kind of exhausted. It's kind of exhausted by there, so we could just drop that back down. And again, each transition could actually, each time it actually comes in, could do something slightly different. And again, that's where like using multiple versions of the same plugin could actually work really nicely. So let's duplicate that, Command D. And then what we can do is just clear the automation envelope. Delete automation. Pop that in, and then we'll find another one around here. So let's see. We've got to use Mission to Mars, haven't we? Mission to the Mars. Let's find out what's going on here. Ah, pretty cool kind of telephone effect actually, so that's nice. Yeah, I want something that'll just absolutely... Time travel has got to be a good one, hasn't it? Yeah, a bit flangy. Real VHS vibe. I love VHS stuff. Nice. Lovely flanging going on there, actually. So yeah, these extra presets that you get are absolutely fantastic, as you can hear. Really, really, really cool. So I'm going to look for... There's something else. It's a vibe, but it's weird. Let's try. It's a vibe, but it's weird. So yeah, you could try something like that. And we can have that just for that section. Drop everything else down and off. So what we would get is 2 transitions with 2 different plugins. And then there'd be nothing stopping you actually sending some of it to the other instance of transit. So we're transiting on top of our transits here. Very cool. And then one back up to normal. Obviously you need to manage mix levels because some of these, like, you know, because they're heavy effects, heavy distortion, etc., it will change your mix level. What's really nice is actually within Transit itself, like each element comes, or each, you know, instance of it can come with a utility. So let's say, for example, if this was like the particularly loud one, I'd be able to take the gain down, change the tone with a bit of filtering, that kind of thing. Definitely was on this last one. So what we can do is just drop that on. No, not that one. Drop by 6 dB or something, and just manage the gain stage, and so it doesn't completely wreck your mix, basically. So really, really nice. So yeah, as I mentioned before, though, we were doing it over the drums, and we kind of got a bit selective with drums and everything else. One of the things I mentioned was like actually just throwing it on top of the master, you know, and it can do some really interesting stuff. Like so. This one here called Telephone Effect, which is really cool. This is like the perfect telephone effect, like. And that's the cool thing about some of the transition controls, like you don't even need to kind of like go all the way, shall we say. And again, like, because we're in Ableton here, we can kind of automate on the master channel. So we can say, right, let's just get a little bit more sort of detailed here. Actually, what we could do is do it on this section here. And say, for example, we do a loop. an 8-bar loop between 41 and 49. Everything triggering there nicely. And we can take that last section like so. In fact, we'll just do a 4-bar. There we go. Or even just... And there you go. So, yeah, as Kevin Rostart just said, it's like a DJM integrated tool. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's like, imagine having the effects unit from like a Pioneer DJM mixer with like all of the multi-effects and everything you can do with it. Say, for example, from something like a Pioneer V10 or like a DJM 900 or a 2000 Nexus, whatever. You know, you could like have this in plug-in form right here on your master. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with using tools like Transit on your master. Obviously, you've kind of got to be a bit careful around, you know, levels and making sure everything sounds even and everything else. But yeah, I mean, integrating stuff like this is very, very cool indeed. And again, like a lot of the stuff we were talking about doing before, like, you know, adding like, you know, a bit of distortion or, you know, that kind of thing. There was something here that was called Make Everything Tighter. Where is it? There's a great preset for this here. You've got a drum destroyer and you've got a dynamic pitch shift. Fatter drums, you know, that kind of thing. Just nasty in the best possible way, you know? So if you want to cause a little bit of carnage, like this is definitely the plugin for you. So let's do drums destroyer. So yeah, really, really nice. And you know, lots of different really, really cool little, oh yeah, make things tighter. There you go, that's the one I'm looking for. So that one's a bit calmer, so it kind of suits a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, there's a potential for things to kind of like get out of hand very quickly. So you do have to be a bit careful with it. I would definitely use caution. One of the things you'll have seen me do here, and this limiter wasn't like for my mastering or anything. I literally put this on because I put the Transit on the master because I absolutely don't want to incinerate my ears while I'm actually working in headphones. Or if I'm working on my monitors, I don't want to damage my monitors because, as you heard before with the feedback percentages and stuff, like, can get really wild and things can get a little bit out of control. So I definitely recommend if you're doing pretty mad stuff like this where there's going to be lots of feedback involved, lots of processing, just, you know, control your volume levels a little bit, especially with headphones, and do put a limiter on because it is going to help. It is going to help sort of like, you know, from a health perspective, I should say. So, you know, really, really nice. So pretty cool. Like, again, like for transitions and everything else, like one of the things you could also do, again, if we think about the transition, shall we say, and a final thing we can kind of really take a look at here is, if I just delete that, let's say, for example, we might want to capture what's going on with this element here. So let's say, you know, we want to get this. Yeah, we want to capture this. So what we can do is get down to 16 audio here. We'll get into our resampling. There we go. From resampling. Monitor in. Record arm. And what we'll do is we'll just hit record right from here. Turn the loop off. So now we've got that movement of transit from return channel F. We've got that printed, resampled into a channel, And what we could then do is cut it. We could cut it there. We could even do things like, say, for example, we could reverse it and have a completely different element. So let's... And we can even do wild stuff. Like, again, this is like one of my favorite tricks with transitions and stuff. Put it on beats mode, 16th note, preserve, have it on the single arrow pointing to the right, drop it to about 40. And yeah, you could loop that up. Make sure it's tight. You can kind of work with that, do whatever you need to do. Really, really interesting. So again, you can start to resample everything in. And again, as Raccoon's just said, you can stretch it. You can do whatever you want with it, basically. So yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then Technic makes a great point there, saying could work well on a send if too much is an insert, a bit like a New York compression on drums. A fantastic point. Really, really, really cool. Gad asks, do you think we can watch this video later as I don't have time to go on watching? Well, we are going to bring things to an end in a moment, Gad. And also as well, all of these live streams will be available on this YouTube channel. Like, it takes a little bit of time after we finish going live, but it basically it will be there for you. And you'll see plenty. I've done plenty of streams for ADSR this year, and you'll see all of them. So feel free to go back through the back catalogue because there's some absolute belting live streams there. So yes, indeed. So yeah, it seems to be, looking at the chat, there is, a lot of love for this plugin, and definitely, as I said, it's been a great time for plugins at the moment, and Baby Audio have brought it again, and as we said before, it is actually, available on ADSR Sounds at the moment, and it's also available for 40% off, and you get these extra presets, which we just had a look at today, and it's been an absolute pleasure to actually, lift one of these tracks, like, with this new plugin. It's just great. I mean, I think it's a great example, actually, thinking about it, of a song that, you may have put to one side and then a new plugin comes out and then it breathes new life into it. So sometimes maybe you're just waiting for the right tool. So absolutely, yeah. And Kevin's made a great point there, saying, I think it can fit for every style of music as you let see it. Yeah, exactly. It reacts to the style of music that you are putting through it. That's the great thing. So whether you make hard style, drum and bass, progressive house, techno, breakbeat like this, organic house, whatever, like, it's going to do something for you. So it's well worth the investment, I think. And again, with it being 40% off at the moment, I think it works out at something like only about like $59 or something like that. I mean, don't quote me. I actually think we've got it on the ADSR website right now. So if we have a little quick look at that webpage before we finish off. There we go. Yeah, £56.32 in English. And again, you get all of these extras. So yeah, definitely worth checking it out. Again, links will be in the chat. I'm sure the team at ADSR are doing a wonderful job of keeping you all up to date with that. And it's been a fantastic time yet again. Thank you very much to everyone for tuning in. This is a great way to start the weekend, and I hope you're all going to do well. I hope you're all going to have a great time. It's a holiday weekend here in the UK, so we're going to enjoy ourselves. I'm off to London for the weekend. And again, if you don't know who I am, this is what I do. My name's Paul Nolan. I am a producer. I'm an artist. I've worked with people like Sasha and Junkie XL in the past. And I also have just released an album. So if you like ambient music, cinematic stuff, orchestral stuff like Nils Fromm, John Hopkins, Oliver Arnold, Kiasmos, that kind of thing, my album's called Dissolve and it's available on streaming. Of course, I'd love for you to buy it on Bandcamp instead of, streaming it, because, support your local artists and all of that. And yeah, feel free to check it out and check me out on social media at Paul Nolan Sound. I also help and develop artists as well. So yeah, look me up online. Look forward to hearing from you all. And thank you very much for tuning in once again, like I've just said. So yeah, take it easy, guys. Much love. Enjoy yourselves. And see you soon. Bye for now.